Hello, everybody. Welcome to Build Fly Go. So this is our return trip from Huatulco to Laredo in Texas. Um, it's uh, it's an interesting time to be flying home, which you'll notice later. So it's beautiful in Huatulco on the Pacific coast of Mexico, and unfortunately, the U.S. is starting to get hit by a massive winter storm that's covering most of the country. So our goal for today is make it to the U.S., right? Like make it into the country, so that the more complicated parts of the trip are over and we're just down to the usual, cross country flying. So this time we flew up the Pacific coast instead of cutting across. And going into Tampico, which was our original plan. And we did a ton of flight planning around this because I really wanted to go through Tampico because it's sort of a known factor, right? Like I knew who I had to talk to, where to go, what it looked like. But the weather in Tampico was marginal VFR at best. It was shifting between broken and overcast at like 2,500, 3,000. But the MEAs, the minimum route altitudes for IFR flying in Mexico, are really high because of the mountain ranges that you fly over. So for us to file IFR over the mountains into Tampico, we would have had to file at like 16,000. And, like I really didn't want to deal with that. The airplane is heavy, because we've got a stuff in the back. There's both of us. I ate a bit much this past week because I'm just sitting in the pool and eating, and full fuel. And the climb is basically right there, right? Like you have to climb from Huatulco all the way up to 12,000 feet just to pass that mountain range, and it's just a few miles. So it would have been not a great way to do things. If we had been doing them VFR, sure, but IFR was not on the cards. So the plan here is we're flying up the coast towards Acapulco, and around Acapulco we're going to cross inwards into the middle of the country, and we had filed to I believe it was Morales. Mike is the airport that we had filed into. Mostly because of fuel planning, we weren't quite sure what we were going to be burning. As you noticed in the beginning of that flight, we stayed pretty low because we wanted to see the water and see if we could see any wildlife and animals. Supposedly, it's really pretty right there. I didn't see anything, but you can see the sort of the gorgeous. We're now, I think we're at about 12 or 14,000 now. We're up above the mountains on the sort of the plateau that's up there. And you can see the little wispy clouds that are just above us. And that's sort of, this is fine, right? Like we're VFR right now, and we're safely below the clouds. And but it gives us some food for thought for later, right? Like what's this going to look like later? You can see that I descended a little bit there to keep my separation. And we're on our way to Morales, and you'll notice we've been having some issues talking to controllers on the radio, partially because we're not that high above the ground here, right? Like we're only, I don't know, like 3,000 feet, 4,000 feet above the ground here. And so what we ended up doing is, as we got close to Morales, we had tons and tons of fuel because we had a nice tailwind and we had throttled back a little bit. So we decided that we could make it to San Luis Potosi, which was another hour and change further north in the direction we're going in this case. And so we talked to the Morales controller, and we said, can we just change our flight plan? We're going to go to San Luis Potosi. And, they were fine with it. These controllers speak excellent English. We haven't had, other than the one time in Monterrey, where there was some confusion about the VFR corridors, we haven't had any issues talking to controllers. So here we are. I don't remember which runway this is, but there's two runways. This was 8,000 feet, and there was a little, I think a 3,000 or 2,000 foot runway also that's a crossing runway. And we picked this one. We have, you can see it's bumpy as heck. We have a 15 knot gusting to 25 knot direct crosswind here. This was probably one of the crosswindiest landings I've done. The other runway was much more into the wind, but it was much, much smaller. It was narrower and shorter. You can see the military guy comes out to check on us. You can see him sitting all the way up over there just watching airplanes. But so we decided to go on the big runway because I find that in gusty situations like that, I would rather drift left and right than so that I don't have to be quite so abrupt on my compensating for the landing. So a wider, longer runway for me, if it's really gusty, I would rather do that than a narrower, shorter runway that's closer into the wind. But alas, so this is San Luis Potosi. It was reasonably straightforward. There was a ton of different offices that we had to go to here, and a bunch of confusion as to who we had to talk to as well. You'll notice that we start up, talk to Tower, and Tower says, we don't have a flight plan for you. And I was like, what do you mean? I just had this flight plan stamped by 4 different people. And it's like, yeah, but you also have to go to this other office. So I shut down, I go to the other office, and amusingly, the charts, because we're filing IFR out of here, and you'll see why in a minute. The charts that the other office had were 6 years old, and I had filed an airway that wasn't on the chart, right? The chart that he had. And he's like, no, why don't you go this way? And I was like, because that airway on your chart, like, doesn't work for us, right? Like, there's another one now that's right here that's better and that's going to work. And I thought one of the airways was one way. I don't know if that's really a thing. I need to follow up and look into this. So we had this discussion with the guy, and he's just like, yeah, my chart is like 6 years old. And I was like, yeah, I can see that. You can see, like on my tablet here that on the current chart that there's another airway here. Can we just file this one? And he's like, yeah, sure, no problem. So we filed that one. And then I think we're done. And no, I have to go pay my airport fees next door. And I was like, okay, that's fine, right? Like, these airport fees are usually dirt cheap, not a big deal. And I go next door and I knock and there's nobody there. So I come back to him. I was like, oh, hey, there's nobody there. And he's like, oh, let me call. So he calls and they're like, yeah, they're on break or something. They'll be back soon. I was like, okay, well, I'm trying to leave. Thank you. But I'm trying to leave. And he's like, yeah, just give it a minute. Okay. So we give it a minute. And then I come back and nobody's there. And he's like, tell you what, why don't you write technical stop on your paperwork here and then just go? I was like, really? Is this okay? And he's like, yeah, you'll be fine. Technical stop. You're just here for fuel. Okay. So, he's like, here, write it here. And we wrote technical stop, and I just walked away and went to the airplane, started up. Tower had our flight plan. We picked up our clearance, and off we go. So this is like, I love the views here, right? Like, it's hilly, and it's got these sort of mountainy peaks. We are heavy again, right? Because we just topped off full fuel. The plane is heavy. So our climb is a bit slow right now. We're seeing, I want to say I'm seeing about 500 feet per minute up in the, we're in the 12,000 foot range right now. And the other thing that's going on is my cylinders, like the engine is getting hot, right? Because we're climbing pretty steep for a long time. So honestly, engine CHT, cylinder head temperature, is currently what is slowing us down on the climb more than anything, because I have to keep either leaning or leveling off to cool them off and things like that. So just things that you don't think about when you don't usually fly, hot and heavy up high. But here we go. We're actually off the ends of the mountain range now. And this is what it's just overcast. It was entirely overcast all the way until sort of the ridge of the mountains. So we're past the mountains. We're still at 10,000 feet. We're about to get transferred to Houston Center, I believe. I think it was Houston Center. and they start descending us. As expected, we knew there was a little bit of an overcast here. We knew there was a possibility of getting wet, but it was like nicely layered like this. It was beautiful, right? Like nicely layered. The ceilings, if I remember right, in Laredo were 1,500 feet. So no big deal, right? Like it's just a question of just punching through. There was a couple thousand feet of clouds, and then we punched through, and there we go. There's Laredo. There's the ground. It was one of the smoothest approaches we've had in a long time. It wasn't bumpy at all. It was just like glass smooth all the way through. And landed on the 3-6 left in Laredo, the big runway. And then we taxi. A little bit of confusion here. I told him, "Oh, we're going to Signature," and it's like, "Okay." And I was like, "Oh, wait, no. We have to go to border protection." And we waited for that airliner to leave. And here's the border building right there. You can see the wind. It's blowing, but it's right down the runway, and it's not gusty at all. So here we are. We're in Laredo. We're spending the night in Laredo. The weather does not get better for the next day, and hopefully I'll have a video for the following day in a few days. Behind the scenes hint, the plane is actually in Dallas and I am in Wisconsin. The weather got much worse. But here we go. So we're done with the customs and border protection. They were really nice. Very easy, very, very easy, nice guy. And so we taxi over to Signature, which is just down the way, and leave the plane for the night. Thanks for watching, folks, and more videos to come.